Hello, welcome to a special edition of The Naked Scientists, which comes from the Darwin Festival. And with me is Bubba Brinkman. Hello, Bubba.
Well, hello. Good to be here.
Not a local, I'd say, given the accent.
No, I'm from Vancouver, Canada.
Tell us a bit about your art, because I've never met anyone who does quite what you're going to do.
I call it lit hop, literary hip-hop or literary rap, and in the past I've applied it to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and here at the Darwin Festival I'm going to be applying it to modern evolutionary biology and Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species.
So over the next 60 minutes, what are you going to treat the audience to?
Well, basically what I've done is research every aspect that I can find of evolutionary biology and write each of those elements into a chapter or remix or rap song. One biologist who saw this described it as a first-year biology course summed up in an hour in rap. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. The main inspiration was from The Origin of Species, where Charles Darwin says, if you believe that species are mutable, if you believe evolution to be true, you must conscientiously express your conviction. So this show is me expressing my conviction in the truth of evolution. But to help me out with that project, I'm going to have to enlist the help of Mr. Richard Dawkins, who's going to launch this first song for me. So check it out.
Whoever is led to believe that species are mutable will do good service by conscientiously expressing his conviction. For only thus can the load of prejudice by which this subject is overwhelmed be removed.
So what you know about natural selection? Go ahead and ask a question and see where the answer gets you. Try being passive-aggressive or try smashing heads in and see which tactic brings your plans to fruition. And if you have an explanation of mine, then you're wasting your time, because the best watchmaker is blind. It takes a certain base kind of impatient mind to explain away nature with intelligent design. But the truth shall set you free from those useless, superstitious beliefs in a literal Adam and Eve and that Edenic myth, because their family tree is showing some genetic drift. Take it from this bald-headed, non-celibate monk with the lyrical equivalent of an elephant's trunk. It's time to elevate your mind state and celebrate your kinship with the primates, the weak and the strong. Who got it going on? We lived in the dark for so long. The weak and the strong. Darwin got it going on. Creationism is dead wrong. Tell him, Dawkins.
The view which most naturalists entertain, namely that each species has been independently created, is erroneous.
Okay, it's time to reveal my identity. I'm the manifestation of tens of millions of centuries of sexual selection. Best believe I'm the best of the best of the best of the best of the generations of competitive pressure genetically. But don't get upset, because we got the same pedigree. You and I will find a common ancestor eventually if we rewind geological time regressively, and I can say the same for this hibiscus tree, and this lizard, and this flea, and this sesame seed. And if you still disbelieve in what your senses perceive, I can even use my rhyme as a remedy, because there's so much variation in the styles in this industry and differential survival when the people listening decide what they're into and what really isn't interesting. You could thrive like Timberlake on a Timberland beat or go extinct like Vanilla Ice and NSYNC. It's survival of the fittest, but fitness is a tricky thing. It changes from place to place, from winter to spring. But the real question in this social scientific simile is heredity, whether we inherit our techniques from our predecessors or invent them independently. But then we're talking memes, and that's a different thing. Richard Dawkins, can I get a proper definition, please? The weak and the strong. Who got it going on? We lived in the dark for so long. The weak and the strong, Darwin got it going on. Creationism is dead wrong. The weak and the strong, who got it going on? Whoever leaves the most spawn. The weak and the strong, Darwin got it going on. Creationism is erroneous. I hear some people complain, like, I don't want to be an ape. I never came from monkey DNA. I believe God made me in a day. Jesus saves. Yeah, he's great. But stop being afraid to use the reason he gave you to let science solve some giant problems and find some final results. I think it's time for y'all to let your minds evolve and listen to a different kind of silent call, the kind that comes from pine trees and not pine saw. I'm talking about the mythical vision that Einstein saw, wondering at the infinite depths of divine thought and realizing that scripture could never define God. Because if there is a personal God, then he's been jerking off. So why would he bother designing an albatross when natural selection does such an excellent job just by balancing benefits and costs? Science will banish God into the gaps if he can't help us understand the simplest facts. I want a relaxed God of infinite naps. We'll be alright without him. Just give us a chance. The weak and the strong, who got it going on? We lived in the dark for so long. The weak and the strong, Darwin got it going on. Creationism is dead wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe it, then say it with me. When I say creationism is, you say dead wrong. Creationism is
dead wrong.
Creationism is
dead wrong.
See, when I say creationism is, you say dead wrong. Creationism is
dead wrong.
Creationism is
dead wrong.
Now, actually, according to Darwin, creationism is erroneous. Thank you. occasionally ask me where this strange beast came from, this rap Darwin thing. My background is in medieval literature. I did my thesis on the Canterbury Tales, and I did a show a few years ago called The Rap Canterbury Tales, which I took to the Edinburgh Fringe. And a microbial genomist from the University of Birmingham named Dr. Mark Palin, who's recently written a book called The Rough Guide to Evolution, he approached me back in September and said, "Would you consider doing for Darwin what you did for Chaucer?" And I was so thankful that he said for Darwin and for Chaucer instead of to Darwin and to Chaucer. On the psychology index, this person is high in openness. So, yeah, I'll do it. Dun-dun. So then I got myself a stack of evolutionary biology books and read my way through as many as I could get in the deadline, of course, being February 12th, Darwin's birthday. And Professor Palin flew me here to perform in Cambridge and at UCL in February to celebrate Darwin's birthday. Now, he had one condition. He said, "Okay, I'll commission you to do a Darwin rap, but you have to send me drafts of the lyrics, and I'm going to check them for scientific accuracy, and then he would send me back corrections if I said anything unclearly. So now I can say this is a peer-reviewed hip-hop show." Okay? And I'm going to talk about controversial things and try to represent various sides of the debates within evolutionary biology, but I'm also going to try and say what things evolutionary biologists have no contention about whatsoever. Okay, but if you hear me say anything contentious, I can say everything in the show is based on a book I read, so you can either take it up with me, or you can take it up with the army of scientists marching in back of me. I'm the figurehead here, just trying to be the herald. All right, so welcome to the Charles Darwin Bicentennial. So, why does everybody think this guy is so special? Merely because a man was born 2 centuries ago who, as far as anyone knows, was the first to recognize the underlying pattern behind the pageant affectionately known as life on this planet. He was the first to understand it, the first to translate his amazement at the wonder of life into a way to explain it. So this is a celebration of Darwin's greatness in the form of a rap. Some would say a debasement. I would say, be patient. Just think of this as a manifestation of the evolutionary equation, as a recapitulation of life, a reenactment. So wait, how do you go from amoebas to rappers? You open The Origin of Species and you read its chapters. The first chapter is about the impact of people's actions on farm animals, pets, and domestic crops. Where did they come from? Well, from original stocks of wild animals and plants which were selected and crossed for the best properties and thus became the effect of their cause. But of course, not every selection was conscious. Still, even if breeders in ancient Egypt couldn't see this and had no idea how to rework the features of a species of sheep or increase the sweetness of their peaches every season when they chose to feed it or to seed it or to breed it or to weed it out and delete it because they didn't see it as needed, whether the preferences in question were for bigger chicken breasts or whippets with a thinner midsection, or if it was just an inner predilection to pick the best in any mixed collection, that's artificial selection. But there's nothing artificial about domestication. Ant colonies keep domestic aphids. It's just an arrangement where one hand washes the other. We protect the cow, and the cow offers the udder. And even if there's never a conscious discussion between us and the heifer, if our little selections and little preferences can change and enhance the critical differences between wild and domestic breeds over the centuries, then maybe that can explain everything. See, in nature, it isn't us that makes the selections, it's just survival and reproduction in the midst of competition, where slight differences that arise randomly get selected by the pressures applied environmentally, and eventually species divide like a family tree into everything alive, from a fly to a manatee. So wait, how does this apply to the craft of the MC? Yeah. Well, they say evolution is variation plus selection plus heritability, right? Variation can be found in the styles on display. See, rappers all have different techniques when they're on stage, like say ho, etc. And the results can be seen in the audience's face. Like, for instance, at this moment, you all look amazed, like guppies removed abruptly from their aquatic space. Some of your minds are probably racing over questions of style and race and genre and time and place, and some of your eyes are glazed like, for God's sake, how long will this take? But if you all feel that way, then soon I'll be replaced by someone more entertaining, like maybe Lil Wayne. See, This is the rap version of the doctrine of Malthus. It's the proportion of hungry mouths to food resources in the form of captive audiences, where crowds of 2 or more will always be at least half as common as performers. Can you see the mathematical problem? But survival on stage is a non-random process, because those who get massive responses, like say ho, etc., tend to influence those who aspire to get massive responses, like say ho, etc. So if you say I sound like, for instance, Eminem, I'll say, that's preposterous. But if you catch me grabbing my crotch and acting obnoxious, then I might have to acknowledge that this is a form of imitation modified by experience, which is similar to the genetic basis of inheritance, except it's part Darwinism and part Lamarckism, with genes and culture co-evolving as we rock to the rhythm. But whether you think cultures really evolve, or if it's just a silly metaphor that's pretty but false, or whether you've never even thought about that, I still think Darwin can teach us a lot about rap, because it's all about that competition for status with intricate language delivered in battles, and it's all about getting that fitness advantage and the different adaptive behavior patterns that have us acting crazier than capercaillie mating dances. But hey, that's natural selection. So just sit back and listen and witness the evolution of the rap profession. As soon as you start seeing this evolutionary algorithm, variation plus selection plus heritability, you start seeing it everywhere. Drives you a little insane. You're like John Nash, like there's pattern. So one form of evolution that I discovered takes place in my iPod. I load it up with hundreds, thousands of songs, and I listen to them all on shuffle. And the songs that pop up that I don't like so much get deleted next time I'm in iTunes. And the songs that pop up that I really like don't get deleted. They get selected for. And over time, my playlists evolve. Okay, one group that's been in my playlist since I first got an iPod is called Dead Prez from Brooklyn, New York. And they have a song called I'm a African. Just like this, okay? So they're using this song in the context of black nationalism. They're saying black people all around the world have a similar history because of diaspora slavery, and we all need to get together politically and get political power based on that common history. Obviously, that's not the context I'm going to use the song in. Okay? I'm going to use the song in the context of unity of common descent, because I've seen videos of Dead Prez performing this song, and it's a call and response chorus, and they're like, I'm an African! And the whole crowd shouts back, I'm an African! And all the white kids do it too in every race, because it's hip-hop, right? But when I saw that in the video, I was like, how ironic. Because they are African. Everyone is an African, right? It doesn't matter what your race is. The color of your skin just tells us something about how long ago your ancestors left Africa. But if you go back far enough, everyone on this whole planet is an African. So this is like the most inclusive song ever written in history. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to do this call and response thing. Okay? So I'm going to say, I'm an African, and you're going to look in my eyes, and you're going to see that I believe it. I believe every word. I am an African. You're not going to be like, clever gimmick, white boy. You're going to be like, yeah, he's an African. And you're going to shout it back at me, and you're going to believe it too, because you're going to feel it in your DNA, because that's where it comes from, okay? So we're going to try this out. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
Yeah, so I know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
Okay, we got to fix this. Note that the song is I'm a African. Some people are saying I'm an African. Grammatical correctness aside, that's an error, because I'm African. People sometimes ask me, why do rappers mess with grammar? Is it because they're grammatical rebels as well as political rebels? No, if you think about it, if they left the "an" in there, then the title of the song in the call and response would be, I'm an African. I'm an African. It sounds like saying, I'm really naff. Brits will understand this. North Americans, maybe not so much. But naff is not a good word. So I had to drop the N so that it becomes this kind of staccato, syncopated rhythm, like, boom, 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 boom. I'm an African. Tribal rhythm. I'm an African. I'm an African. So we'll do this one more time. But this time, I don't want to hear the word naff popping out of the crowd at all. I just want to hear, I'm an African, all right? I'm an African.
I'm an African.
Yeah, and I know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
All right, there's a couple ends in there still. Yeah. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
That's right, so I know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
So I know what's happening. Are you an African?
I'm an African.
That's right, so you know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
Yeah, so we know what's happening. No, I wasn't born in Ghana, but Africa is my mama, cause that's where my mama got her mitochondria. You can try to fight if you want to, but it's not gonna change me, cause it's plain to see. Africans are my people, and if it's not plain to see, then your eyes deceive you. I'm talking primeval. The DNA in my veins tells a story that reasonable people find believable, but it might even blow your transistors. Africa is the home of our most recent common ancestors, which means human beings are all brothers and sisters. So check the massive evidence of Homo erectus and Australopithecus afarensis in the fossil record, and then try to tell me that we're not all connected. The fossil record has gaps, but no contradictions, and it complements the evidence in your chromosomes. So I came to let you know about your ancestral home. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
That's right, so I know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
That's right, so I know what's happening. Are you an African?
I'm an African.
You believe it, so you know what's happening. I'm an African.
I'm an African.
Damn right, so we know what's happening. Everybody needs to know what's happening, because everybody on this planet is an African. What? That is the idea that most enrages Darwin's detractors. The idea that we came from ape-like ancestors. Some people still question this and say, but if we came from monkeys, then how come there's monkeys still in existence? Allow me to illustrate a similar instance. I'm descended from Dutch Calvinist immigrants who came to Canada in the 1950s, and I still have second cousins who live in the Netherlands, but they're not my ancestors, they're my relatives, since we have common genetic elements inherited from our great-grandparents. That's just 3 generations back. But here's the relevance. 3,000 generations back, human beings all have common ancestors. So really, we're all relatives. Which also means that all relationships are relatively incestuous. Further back, we also have common ancestors with chimps and gorillas and elephants and plants, and billions of years back, our ancestors are all single-cellular. But what I find incredible isn't this principle of unity of common descent. Oh, that's just elegant. What's incredible to me is that some of my living relatives still believe that the Earth was created by a benevolent God about 70-odd centuries ago, around the time of the Egyptians, and that same God is currently manipulating the elements, and that evolutionism is devilish. Did I mention that I was descended from Calvinist fundamentalists? Well, I still have cousins in Canada as living representatives. Strangely enough, none of them in Holland. But I do have cousins in Canada as living representatives. And approximately 20% of them. And at the dinner table, we debate statistics. Right. Pictures like 8 Mile. I say creationism is unscientific. 99% of practicing scientists accept evolution as the best explanation we have for living systems. Why? Because there's overwhelming empirical evidence. And they say, Baba, science isn't run by consensus. You know, that 1% is significant. Those are the creationist scientists who have found signs of intelligent design. But whenever they try and publish it, they get blacklisted. Besides, your presuppositions are materialistic. Maybe all that evidence that scientists say they've collected just proves that God wants our faith to be tested. So then I say, but wait, that means your benevolent God is perpetrating a massive intellectual fraud. So either evolution is the victim of a frame job, which explains all of its predictive successes, or we have to separate God from the scientific method. And that's when my sister steps in to defend a different kind of creationism. Cultural creationism, also known as social constructivism or postmodernism. She says, Baba, the Western scientific method is just as subjective as every other cultural tradition, except it's just better at pretending to be objective. Because, all behavior is socially constructed, and mostly it just promotes injustice. And, gender roles have nothing to do with genitals. They're just a way for men to control women's goals and try to turn us all into Playboy centerfolds. Because, like, haven't you heard about that tribe in the Amazon where the woman does the man's jobs and hunts and plants the crops and brings home the food for the man to wash? I can't remember exactly what that clan is called, but I know it's a published fact because I read about it in my women's studies class. And it proves that gender is a socially constructed act. So how does sociobiology explain that? Huh? And then all I can do is come back with more statistics about the majority of indigenous societies where polygamy is prolific and about human sexual dimorphism and the different reproductive investments between men and women, which of course then gets my religious cousins offended because it doesn't credit Genesis with our humble beginnings. And let's just say the discussions are endless. But it isn't about who is impartial. No one's impartial. It's about how much evidence you can marshal and how you deliver the parcel. And when my relatives argue, I have to have faith that we can reach the genuine article in a rational way. That's a different kind of faith than my cousins have in divine creation. But to all of my relatives and fellow primates, I say, if it makes you feel better, then go ahead and pray. In fact, here's how I pray in a secular way. I say, I have creationist relatives and relative apes. And I wish them all happiness, whatever their faith. And I wish myself patience, since I relish debates. Let us all be respectful and still tell it straight. Now we are going to get into the highly nebulous and contentious realm of evolutionary psychology. All right, so there's a lot of people have a lot of bones to pick with this one. I'm going to pick one of the survey's studies that I found the most convincing. This is from a book called Homicide, which I read about secondhand in a book called Evolution for Everyone, the author of which is in the front row. Dun, dun, dun. So anyway, he can tell me later whether I've accurately represented his writing. This was a book that correlated homicide and violent crime statistics with other indexes in various cities and cultures. Okay, they looked at the violent crime and homicide statistics. They looked at the socioeconomic index to see the disparity between rich and poor in that area, how wide the gap was. They looked at the life expectancy rate from all sources of death besides homicide, so they could control for that. And then they looked at the teenage pregnancy rate. And they found that if you only knew the life expectancy rate from causes of death besides homicide and the socioeconomic index, you could use those two factors to predict all of the other factors, that they correlated and followed each other. Okay, and what they suggested was that these statistics represented young people adapting to violent, low-opportunity societies and communities when opportunities for pro-social advancement weren't there. The violent crime was almost entirely caused by young men who were aggressively competing for status when they didn't have options to compete using music and sports and educations and jobs and other things that are pro-social. And the young women were speeding up their reproductive decisions based on the low prospect of long life. Because if you think about it, if everyone's dying in their 40s, you're not going to wait until you're in your late 30s and have a great career before you have your first children, are you? Because when you ask these young women, why did you have a baby so young, they often say, because I wanted my kids to know my parents. And that continuity, it's necessary to speed up those decisions when they weren't accidents, and often they weren't. So, what this suggests is people evolve and adapt to their environmental circumstances, and also, there's ways that we can work with those environmental circumstances to improve behaviors that we see as repugnant. Now, you guys that's my summary of the theory. You may think it's right, and you may think it's wrong. But if it's right, it explains so much about rap music. Think about it, okay? Rap music is primarily the testimonials of young people who grew up in very dangerous environments where they had no positive opportunities, and it's them explaining what they did to survive and what the people they grew up with did to survive. Okay, so then I thought, what if rappers knew this theory and used it to explain their circumstances and potentially transcend them, right? What would rap sound like then? So then I went and listened to all these rap songs, and I found one called Survival of the Fittest. Actually, I already knew about it. It's by Mobb Deep. And it pretty much perfectly explains that circumstance, but then I rewrote all their lyrics to integrate the theory into it. So what this means is I'm going to have to get into my criminal mindset right now, all right? As you can probably tell, this is something of a persona, a dramatis personae. I'm not a person who grew up in a dangerous environment. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. So unless you count, grizzly bears and falling out of trees you tried to climb, sources of hazard were low. But I had a lot of criminal friends. And my criminal friends schooled me to the criminal mindset. Plus, I listened to rap music since I was about 11, so, I'm in there. All right, so, take you to the streets. And what I'm also going to do is, I'm going to show you the video from 1992 of the original Mobb Deep Survival of the Fittest song, and you can tell me whatever. You can consider what you think they're trying to communicate with their body language and things like that. Yeah. This goes out to evolutionary psychologists, biologists, Davian Wilson, David Sloan Wilson, Steven Pinker. Yeah. Yo, we live in this till the day that we die. Survival of the fit. There's a war going on outside no one is safe from. You could run, but you can't hide forever. You come to my block, you'll see some territoriality. A place where kill or be killed is the mentality. But get it straight, it's just a necessary strategy. You gotta play the hand you dealt. You can't magically escape from the habitat that you was born in. 3 homicides in my neighborhood this morning. Cops came and kicked the crooked door in with no warning and started roughing up my young cousin. Shit, she's only 17 and got a bun in the oven plus a concussion. And she ain't done nothing. So keep your mouth shut and don't jump to judgment on the lives we're living. Just close your eyes and listen while I break down some homicide statistics. So if you're thinking the criminal mind is just vacant, you're mistaken. This is calculated risk-taking. We're living in a situation with a low life expectancy and a major discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots. And you wonder why the padlock on every cash box is smashed off? Come on, you can't call it pathological. Nah, that's illogical. You can try to understand it, but you can't stop it though. Not unless you address the root causes, the conscious and unconscious decisions to discount future prospects. Come on, it's obvious the beat keeps bouncing, the homicide rate keeps mounting, which leads to steep discounting and a lot of violence. But it's not a virus, it's a rational response to high-risk environments with short time horizons, high stakes and highly visible prizes. And you wonder why we're criminal-minded? Hey, you can't say we'll get satisfaction if we're patient with self-control and delayed gratification when the only job that pays is casket making, and death is the ultimate planned cancellation. So check the facts and recent data releasing. It shows a pattern of increasing competition. A bunch of young guys all struggling, status seeking, and causing the crimes that make the social fabric weaken. And life expectancy also predicts teen pregnancy. The need to leave a legacy genetically will never be completely controlled contraceptively. Yeah, that's transparent. Imagine if your kids would never meet their grandparents unless they took a page from the Bristol Palin plan for parenthood. And then they say, ooh, these young girls are so damn careless. Getting pregnant before marriage, it's such a tragedy. Apparently it's also a reproductive strategy, especially when you can see them adjusting actively when their circumstances change. See, in both the cases of the young ladies with babies and the male risk takers, you see people adapting to their situations. And it's the same in different places and with different races. This is not about ethical justifications. It's evolutionary psych, and it's just the basics. And still people call this behavior maladaptive because of our reaction when violence happens. But if we really want to change the outcome, maybe we should just start questioning how it's adaptive. And the bottom line is that iniquity and life expectancy are the ultimate causes of crime and the results of crime. To me, that's true. The two combine together in a feedback loop. But I got some moves to make now, I'll be back soon. Just don't ask me what I'm about to do, right? Cause I can't say, no I can't say, so it's left the untold fact. Until my death, my ghost will stay alive. It's survival of the fit, only the strong survive. That's right, we live in this till the day that we die. Survival of the fit, only the strong survive. What you saying, we live in this till the day that we die. Survival of the fit, only the strong. Thank you. Until I arrived at this festival, I didn't realize that group selection was a swear word. But I'm finding this now. Richard Dawkins said all modern biologists rightly are derogatory or derivative of group selection theory. And then later, Elliot Sober pointed out that Darwin endorses it for the evolution of morality, and Dawkins said, yes, okay, that is one example of group selection. But there seemed to be a contradiction there. And earlier today as well, Michael Ruse said, I would not He said, I wouldn't say that Edward Wilson was a group selectionist, but he does seem to be arguing that morality and religion and art are adaptive at the level of the group, whatever level the selection is happening on. Anyway, that sounded contradictory to me. So I'm gonna step into this minefield as best as I can. And basically what this applies to, probably this is not a group that I have to explain this to, but if it's new to anybody, group selection looks at the ways that self-sacrifice and altruism can evolve in animal species. The quintessential example is Dictyostelium. Small amoebas that feed separately, live separately, and are separate organisms, but when they run out of food, they band together and form a kind of Megatron super transformer thing, and that's a slime mold that then crawls away looking for more food. And if they don't find it, then they form into a stalk, and the top bursts, and all of the spores of the individuals go off, which means that the ones who formed the base of the stalk just committed suicide to help the ones at the top. How would that evolve under circumstances of biological self-interest if it's not the case that they're all close kin, which I'm not sure what the verdict is on that, but that phenomenon exists in the natural world. Then I thought, this is some hippie stuff here, isn't it? This is like biological socialism. So then I thought, who better to help explain this phenomenon than a bunch of my dope-smoking, snowboarding, we are the world hippie friends from BC, dude. Man, BC was like the draft-dodging mecca in the 70s, yeah. So this whole, group selection thing is my world right here. Alright, check this out. Yeah. Yo, survival of the fittest is such a bleak vision. I mean, are we really all just like a freakish collision of selfish genes selfishly promoting their own individual interests? Well, maybe. But sometimes those interests are collective. But that phrase, man, survival of the fittest, man, that's a phrase that's easily twisted by anybody who's out to justify the meager existence that some people live with. It's a phrase often enlisted by parasites who are eager to benefit from these differences. So, in the 19th century, it was aristocratic eugenesis. In the 20th century, genocidal menaces used survival of the fittest to justify their death sentences. And gangsters still use it today to degrade their victims. Not to mention the purveyors of disaster capitalism. See, these are all examples of social Darwinism. But none of this is based on scientific evidence. Merely saying that something exists in a state of nature doesn't give it a moral basis. Man, that's a false correlation. Sometimes competition increases motivation. But evolution is also based on cooperation. Just ask the Dictyostelium nation. Check this out. See, it's like bacteria combine into eukaryotic cells and then become like organelles within those symbiotic shells. And there's 50 trillion of those in our individual selves. So we're all like physical spaces where creative collectives dwell. And this applies to the societies that we erect as well. Because survival of the fittest also applies to groups. And the fittest group just makes the best combined moves. So can't we all just get along? Whatever we try and do? Man, group selection just puts me in an altruistic mood. Yeah, love thy neighbor. What's that? You need some sugar? Okay, come by later. Of course I'll do you a favor. Why is that? Because I've got the compassion of a vampire bat. If you need some food, I'll do what I can. Doesn't matter if we're not related. You're still my man. You're still my sister. I feel high, man. This universal love is good stuff. God damn. And you don't have to reciprocate either. Because karma is a sophisticated teacher. And karma isn't just like energy waves in the ether. Nah, karma's in the way that everyone hates a cheater. Cheater detection will keep you in check if you jump queues and refuse to treat people respectfully. So go ahead. Take what you want. Run me down. Because I believe what goes around comes around. Liars and thieves and those who try to deceive get dealt with by the immune systems of society. And survival of the fittest? Don't let it baffle you. Because fitness isn't fitness. Nah, fitness is aptitude. Aptitude between the environment and whatever's adapted to it. And in social animals like us, aptitude means attitude. And my attitude is there's nothing we can't do as a human family group as long as we have rules to keep cheaters in check. I figure we can't lose. Man, we could go to the moon and back this afternoon as long as what's bad for me is also bad for you. So let's just all get together and have some food and put an end to this endless feud. Is that cool? Is that cool? I feel high, man. Fair treatment?
We'll talk at the end.
Yeah. Nice. Next we have sexual selection theory set to the tune of the notorious B.I.G. Like this. Yeah. What? Check it. Huh. Yeah. Come on, sicker than your average. Picture any artistic practice with musicians or actors or visual craftsmen. Just pick an example and imagine the competitive advantages that would come with recognition if you have the gift. Now picture the artist with unlimited cash and with picturesque women always giving him glances. Or if you're picturing a woman, then picture the advances of the handsome prince whose attention she catches. Now picture them living happily ever after and having kids faster than Angie and Brad Pitt, all because they have this gift with craftsmanship. Now take it from the master of the adjectives. Yeah, I think it's adaptive. It has to be instinct, in sync with the rhythm. Just listen and sink deep into the subconscious of the obnoxious sexual selection. I'm just ticking the boxes, and if you're feeling it, then yeah, mission accomplished. Biggie, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize these women who love your flashy ways. That's why the rest is so broke and you're so paid. Biggie, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize these women who love your flashy ways. That's why the rest is so broke and you're so paid. Isn't that the perfect summary of sexual selection theory? You will never watch rap music videos the same way again. For this one, I'm going to make a distinction. So far, I've been using the phrase natural selection to mean both natural selection and artificial selection and sexual selection and anything that increases gene frequency in a population. But sometimes they make a distinction, and they say natural selection is anything that helps an organism to survive, whereas sexual selection is anything that helps an organism to reproduce. And those two agendas are often in conflict with each other. If you reproduce, if you survive and fail to reproduce, you have no effect whatsoever on evolution. But if you reproduce and fail to survive, you're great. And that's why some animals like spiders and praying mantises the males have evolved to offer their heads for consumption during sex. The female's on top, and the male's doing his thing down below. And that's because the nutrients help the eggs, right? Luckily, humans didn't go down that evolutionary pathway. But I know some people who have similar tendencies. So it all crosses. All right, so I'll explain this from the perspective of me. Charles Darwin saw natural selection, not sexual selection, but natural selection, as the most serious cause of evolution. But what was going on with bird songs and peacocks? They follow mysterious laws. And then Darwin had a curious thought. It probably occurred to him while explaining his theory to a young Victorian blonde whose face displayed a mixture of desire and curious awe, the immediate cause of which Darwin clearly saw. Yeah. So he said, "My dear, descent with modification comes from the struggle for survival and reproduction. Hence, the reason for some structures must indeed be seduction." What's up? In fact, Darwin's brain was probably one such structure. Just as peacocks' tails show off the genes of the top males, and likewise the songs of nightingales and the fighting skills of elephant seals and minnows with colorful scales. See, these are all traits that sexual selection has shaped through the female preference to get with the fittest mates. But in human beings, that selection goes both ways. Pretty much anything that's just for display and isn't meant to dissuade and chase predators away was probably selected for in a sexual way. But wait, isn't this just such a display? I mean, I really thought I had something to say, but is it just like a demonstration of my DNA? And so what if it is? That's great. What's to explain? Okay, maybe a couple of things. First, to say that something ornate, like complex language, first evolved as a seductive display, that doesn't mean that people only use it just to get laid. Darwin leaves Freud in the dustbin, okay? Like, counterexample, you could use a urine stream to put out a fire. That doesn't mean the penis evolved as a bush firefighter. Right? Look, this is a theory of language function, a theory of where it comes from. What it's used for now, that's a separate discussion. So which was it? Was complex language originally a mechanism of survival or reproduction? Let me put it this way. Can you talk a predator out of attacking? Can you talk a parasite out of infecting? Can you talk a potential mate into consenting? Potentially. Hence, presenting the grand unified theory of rhyme. The mating mind uses lyrical signs combined with wit and wordplay and conversation and humor and different narrative styles to appraise the fitness of mates, both for the purpose of marriage ties and mates of the more temporary kind. See, these are the humble roots of the literary sublime. We are all Shakespearean primates verbalizing our cherry behinds. But wait, how could we possibly test this bizarre theory of mine? Ideally, we could use experimental holding zoos filled with human subjects. Kind of like this. And with an overhead view, we could observe which breeding pairs reproduce and how often they use their verbal ornaments to seduce. We could even separate them into control groups to see whether male or female vocals are more prone to be used to stimulate hormones, although it's true that this sort of experiment on humans isn't normally approved. If only there existed in a state of nature some cultural group preoccupied with making paper and parading naked women shaking their moneymakers in front of competitive males displaying mating behavior while trading their creativity for sexual favors. If such a group existed, I predict it would be a major player in the entertainment industry and would be in major danger of being overwhelmed by angry player haters. But I may have to save some of my research for later. And how do I answer the charge that I'm participating in this mating dance myself with these dazzling bars? That isn't hard. I plead guilty. I worked hard to achieve this ability, and if it also gives my genes visibility for females, then so be it. But I confess, it also reveals my unique disability. See, my tendency to tell monkey fables and funny medieval tales generally fails to attract any nubile young females. It does attract women a lot, though, all highly educated and post-menopausal. I know, isn't it awful? I get mobbed after my Chaucer shows by grandmas thanking me for making it possible for them to appreciate a hip-hop flow. And, you might ask, where are their granddaughters? My guess is they're all at gangster rap concerts. But hey, that's how sexual selection works. Any mutation gets tested first, and if it doesn't get spread, then it gets purged. So this experimental hip-hop mix, where it gets crossed with literature and lectures, will probably get the burial that it deserves. That is, unless you spread it like whispers. So, when I first started writing this show back in January, early drafts of the script sounded a little bit like this. Yo, yo, the origin of species ain't no feces. Dog, believe me. Yeah. And that was all I could think of. And then I thought, well, maybe my show needs to get rewritten. And sometimes people ask me, how does your show get written? Like this: performance, feedback, revision. And how do I generally develop my lyricism? Kind of like this: performance, feedback, revision. And how do human beings ever learn to do anything? Like this: performance, feedback, revision. And evolution is kind of just an algorithm, isn't it? That goes like this: performance, feedback, revision. So really the genetic code of every living thing was written like this: performance, feedback, revision. See, the genes are like a text with 1,000 pages, and revisions occur in the random changes that come from mutations. And then when they see the light, that's the performance. That's the phenotype. And natural selection, that's the feedback side. That's about who survives and whose genes catch rides in the next generation. Yes, what I'm saying is that a rap performance like this is the best illustration for the way that dissent with modification works, because the performance is necessary to change the words, to decide which have an impact and which to send back to the drawing board. In fact, I just did that when you failed to react, because any line can change, and mutations occur when I improvise on stage. Because up until this moment, everything I said was off the page. But now it's time for me to improvise as I kick some rhymes and try to just hypnotize your lips and eyes like Notorious B.I.G. I'm old enough so that when I buy liquor, they're not like, let me see ID. But that's cool because I'm trying to take it back to school, the place that I come from. No dum-dum. I'm like trying to spit lyrics that are Darwinian and really nifty. And this guy was down with group selection because I could see that he's a hippie. With the long beard, kind of Darwinistic in a way. But anyway, I'm going to take it back to back in the day, like 1859 with these nifty rhymes. That's when the world changed. That's when Charles Darwin revealed the real name of the world, which is basically evolution, all of the life forces. That's right. This is how I'm going to take it. I'm like one of the apocalyptic horses. Call me Dan Dennett. Yes, if you try to battle me on stage, you're going to damn regret it. I swear to God, I'm trying to kick rhymes that are freaking awesome. I'm quite inspired by Richard Dawkins, but I find his attitude a little pompous, but that's okay because he's one of my intellectual heroes. This is how I'm trying to take it, like Casino and Robert De Niro, like monopolize the hip-hop game. Every animal competes. That's right, they're not all the same. But anyway, one day I'm probably going to join this whole game and have my own children. And I'll try to catch up as fast as I can, David Sloan Wilson. I could see that you were actually quite skeptical about my treatment of your whole group selection thing. But that's okay, because maybe I can appraise it the next day and make some little changes, and then everything will be okay. That's how it always works, because this is the adaptation. Freestyle, this is me just spitting out a lot of mutations. Yes, that also explains why I screw up and stutter and sometimes miss the rhythm, because it's all really unplanned. This is how I do it. It's always performance, feedback, revision, and anyone here can use this little algorithm to learn to do anything. Performance, feedback, revision. But remember, you get the feedback and you make the decision. Performance, feedback, revision. Say it with me. Performance, feedback, revision. One more time. Performance, feedback, revision. Last one. Performance, feedback, revision. Freestyle is that you can get you in trouble because it's unedited. The mind escapes the censors, so apologies to Richard Dawkins. In 1859, Darwin spilled the first splashes of his universal acid, and the effects were like magic, burning human arrogance into ashes. In pretty much the same way that Copernican math did. No, the stars don't shine just to improve the view from Earth. No, we're not the center of the universe. No, we weren't created in the image of Jupiter. No, we're not so special. And yes, the truth hurts. But that's how evolution works. Once it's been applied, the acid burns its way into the superstitious side of the human mind and fills it with light. It even dissolves the original sin of pride. That pride that says, I'm a special creation. And my Creator has given me dominion over nature. And He has the power to replenish His creatures. So if species go extinct, well, He can recreate them later. And if He doesn't, that's just part of His plan. But Darwin's acid is hard to withstand. It plucks the arrogance deep from within the hearts of man and teaches us never to build our houses on sand, but instead to try to understand why we're here. Just one species among millions in this biosphere, with millions of ancestors behind us, whose fighting spirits combine to give us this great survival gear. These limbs, these minds, these incredible tools, perfected by millennia of competitive use, and yes, these attention-seeking genitals too. Without them, these human forms could never improve. It's such an elegant view, filled with breadth and grandeur, and yet some people react with depression and anger. Like, it's so unsympathetic. It's so viciously random. What's the point of compassion or ethical standards? If this is just a game that organisms are trapped in, genetically adapting to environmental factors, then there's no responsibility for individual actions. Where's the governing dynamic? Well, once again, Darwin gives us some answers. He says, yes, everything from violence to violets to viruses, it's all just organisms adapting to environments. If you're alive, it's because your ancestors were the best survivalists. They were the finalists in the genetic Olympic Games. Every one of your ancestors survived until reproductive age, and they were all better than their competitors at getting laid. Otherwise, you just wouldn't be sitting here today. Some say it's cynical, but I see something inspirational in this vision of Darwin's. And it goes like this. Organisms are not isolated. Organisms are part of the environmental mix, so your decisions affect evolution. It isn't directionless. Now, before you dismiss me as a mad environmentalist, just try to imagine how natural selection applies to countries like this and like Canada, which have industrialized. Companies live and companies die. And if customers buy based on a company's green plan, well, that affects the economy. Just ask Alan Greenspan. See, cultural evolution is ours to reinvent. Wait, can we affect current events? Yes, we can. And when we choose who to sleep with and reproduce, our sexual choices affect the gene pool. So it's simple. All we need to do is refuse to sleep with mean people, and things will improve. Think about it. Especially women. On you, the pressure is greater, because men will always do what it takes to get into your favor. That's just in our nature. So if selfish behavior was a sexual graveyard, the effects would be major. You have your marching orders, ladies. In each of these cases, our intentional efforts can play the part of environmental pressures. I can say, this is a space where a peaceful existence will never be threatened by needless aggression. I can say, this is an ecosystem where people listen, where justice increases over egotism. This is a space where religions achieve coexistence and racism decreases with each coalition. This is my vision of Darwinism and how we all factor in. Because each of us is a part of the environment. We pass through it and then we change it and affect the way that other people adapt to it. And then afterwards, we get to look back and see how we impacted it and maybe have a laugh if our sense of humor is still alive. And what did Charles Darwin do? Darwin threw some light on the origins of mankind. And he left us with skewered pride. But he taught us that, yes, there's grandeur in this view of life.
Having listened to that, my first reaction as soon as you started was, wow. Not only do you manage to speak very, very quickly and get every word perfect, pretty much, but it all makes scientific sense. How the hell do you do that?
I had to do my homework, basically. This first started in September, and Professor Mark Palin, who commissioned the show, he was very clear that I had to understand the concepts and check them with him and make sure that this would pass muster if it was done in front of Richard Dawkins or a great expert. So I was careful about that, and the enunciation thing, that's my profession. You know, rapping is lyrical expression and storytelling, and you just got to practice.
Do you find that the meter, the pace, the rhythm, the way that you put it together actually helps with the memory? Because I was interviewing Professor James Diggle, who is Professor of Classics here at the University of Cambridge, who was telling me a bit about Greek poetry and pointing out that actually poetry long predated writing. And because there was meter, there was rhyme and rhythm, it constrained the language. And that meant that people could tell when they got the words wrong because it wouldn't fit. And that helped them to keep the message faithful.
Absolutely, and yes, you know, my former incarnation was as a literary scholar, and I was very interested in oral traditions and how refrains and rhythm and prosody and meter and rhyme had been used as memory aids and used as kind of attention-capturing devices. And I think rap is very much in that same mode of using like striking language, rhythm, rhyme, metaphor, and storytelling to convey ideas and interpret culture, but specifically for a live listening audience, which has different considerations than an absent readership. And yes, absolutely, the rhythm and the rhyme are central to the expression, and they definitely do make it easier to memorize, for sure.
The audience listening to the show you've done here in Cambridge were very enthusiastic. Is everyone as enthusiastic? How does it get received?
Everyone is, positive so far that I've talked to, but some people have definitely had some issues that they've taken me up on. I've been chatted up by creationists afterwards who say, when you say creationism is dead wrong, you know, you can't really prove that, can you? And then I have to say,
it's
well,
a theory.
Yeah, technically not, but I'm talking about biological creationism, and I think I make that very clear in the show that, you know, there's no logical refutation of the idea of a deist God at the beginning of the universe or whatever that I've ever heard. But at the same time, I think Darwin has destroyed the idea of a active interventionist creative God that creates organisms. And that's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I'm trying to have more people acknowledge. And on the other side, there's a lot of people who believe that human nature is something that we create out of nothing, just through our own kind of learning and cultural traditions, and that there's no, biological evolutionary logic behind human behavior, and I think that's rubbish. So I've had some people say, you know, don't you feel like evolutionary explanations are a tacit justification of violence and misogyny and things like that? And I think they're absolutely not. I think they'll actually, you know, from a functional perspective, help us to overcome those social ills if we understand where they come from better.
Now, what about the music purists? What about the people who actually make rap music for a living and they flog it for a lot of money? How do they view your art? Are they positive?
Well, I haven't had any of the artists whose work I interpret in the show take me up on that yet. Notorious B.I.G. never will because he's passed away. But a few of the other artists are living, and I hope they get a chance to see it. That may be optimistic of me that it'll get that big. But I think rap people who work in hip-hop as a musical medium will appreciate what I'm trying to do with it. For one thing, like one of the people who came to the show tonight came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I really appreciated the science, but on the other hand, I never understood or liked rap before, and now I understand and like it as a form of expression, and that's really like one of my motivations for sure, is to redeem the art form of rap from people who think it's, you know, superficial and materialistic and misogynist and violent by nature, which is not, which I think it's not. It just reflects those elements of human nature which come out of the artists who have experienced them. Yeah.
Darwin year 2009, what are you going to do next?
I'm hoping that this show will catch interest in places like the United States and Australia and elsewhere. I've done it mostly so far in places where the crowd is highly sympathetic to the message. But the idea behind it was I'd like to convert some people too. I don't know if I've converted anybody yet, but I also haven't performed it in, you know, the Middle East, and I haven't performed it in the American South, and I haven't performed it in some places where I think it would have potentially more impact and get a more hostile reaction. And personally, I feel like I'm quite up for that. It would be very entertaining.
As long as you've got good insurance.
Yeah, or the venue does when it gets burned down. But the real test is going to be the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August, where I'll be doing the show for 25 consecutive days at a main venue right in the center of the Gilded Balloons. So, maybe I'll get picketed. Maybe I'll get interrupted. Maybe someone will take me to task. And I hope that's the case, because it makes for great debates.
And if anyone, having heard your work on this program, thinks, wow, I'd like to follow up this guy, how do they find out more about you?
I do have a website. It's babasword.com, BABASWORD.com, and you can download a free song from the Rap Guide to Evolution. That's the natural selection track with Richard Dawkins sampled into it. And, there's more information there. You can follow up. And if anybody knows of a Darwin-related or humanist-related event coming up, this is a show that I'm trying to take to everywhere there's interest. So, just reach out. I'm here.
The Naked Scientist podcast comes to you from Cambridge University and is supported by the Wellcome Trust, the EPSRC and UK FAST. For more information, look us up online at nakedscientist.com.